the pathway to effective leadership. This segment of C.L.E.A.R deals with a very important aspect of leadership, which is communication. And this segment contains 5 modules that explain why 5 key pillars of a leader's communication are important. Each pillar supports a leader's potential, capacity, and ability to lead others. Now, sadly, most people don't see themselves as a leader, but almost everyone has influence with somebody. And when you boil it down, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And to better influence others, we must be good communicators. And this entire lesson with 5 key pillars can help us do just that. My speaking coach, Retta Galbraith, says, simplicity is a sign of a great communicator. And the C.L.E.A.R method of leadership training is a simple one. So what is the C.L.E.A.R method of communication training? Well, C.L.E.A.R is an acronym that stands for communication, leadership, equipping, attitude, and relationships. Now, each of these key segments represent over half a century of leadership expert John Maxwell's knowledge, skills, and experience distilled down to the 5 key areas of personal growth. Before we get into the first pillar of communication, let's remind ourselves of an essential truth. Being a good communicator starts with being a good person. Not perfect, but a person with good intentions. Now, with that in mind, we must ask ourselves, how does our audience perceive us? Because it will matter. We must ask another important question, maybe even more important than the first one. How do we see our audience? The truth is, how we perceive them and how we feel about them will determine how we serve them. As much as you may want to be accepted, liked, and respected by your audience needs it from you just as much, if not more. Now, why is that? It's because you have the power to add value to them, and they need to feel safe with you while you do. The big question is, will your audience be vulnerable, open up, and allow you to add value to them? John Maxwell once said, "You'll never know safety until you know unconditional love." Now, what does that mean for you and me? Well, as a leader who's doing the speaking, love the people where they are and speak to their potential at all times, with no assumptions, judgments, or condescending messages. Ask yourself, what is my intention toward those I'm communicating with? Now, why is that? Because your audience will need you to answer 3 very important questions. They may not verbally ask them, but they are thinking about them. They're wondering, do you care for them? Can they trust you? And can you help them? Let's talk about a communication myth before we go any further into the pillars of communication. That myth is what number 4 in your guide states. I am not a speaker. Now think about that for a minute. Do we not all speak to someone at one time or another? Yeah, sure we do. And because we do, we're all speakers to some degree. Now, since that's true, then it's true we can all improve our speaking ability, don't you think? Now, with that myth busted, let's dive into communications pillar number 1, engagement. Here's how one dictionary defines the word engage: to occupy, attract, or involve someone's interest or attention, or to participate or become involved in. Let me ask you, how do you know if the person or people that you're communicating with are engaged? Well, one way is to check your audience's pulse. Not literally like a doctor would, but do they look like they anticipate something interesting is coming? Are they plugged in or checked out? Body language as well as facial expressions are great indicators. Now, not all the time, but most of the time. Do they look like they're into you or that they like you? In most cases, the verdict's still out if they don't know much about you. If they don't look like they're into you yet, you've got work to do to engage them. Think back on your last speaking engagement. Well, how did it go? In other words, what results did you get? Good or bad? Well, if it wasn't so good, what do you think might have been the problem or the cause? You got to remember this though. For almost anything we're trying to do, looking for reasons for failing outside our control can only make us victims. And believing we're victims of other people, our environment, or circumstances can only keep us stuck and discourage us. We must look within for the cause rather than blame the circumstances, the environment, or the audience. Simply put, we must focus on what's within our control to improve. We must be honest and non-judgmental toward ourselves and be asked objective questions. And the best way to do that is to have a completely objective coach. A good coach can ask you tough questions like, did you mean to come across as confident and knowledgeable, but maybe you were mistaken for being arrogant? Did you want the people to see you as humble, but maybe they saw you as incompetent or even weak? Did you get the desired results? And how do you know? If you didn't get the desired results, do you know what the problem was? A good coach will ask, what would you do differently to improve the experience if given another chance? Let me ask you, with your last presentation or communication opportunity, did you even get your message across? And how do you know? A good coach might ask you, did you give a call to action? And has anyone responded to it yet? We would do well to remember what George Bernard Shaw once said. The main problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred in the first place. Just because we're speaking doesn't guarantee communication is happening. Too often what we're trying to communicate isn't being received because the people we speak to simply aren't engaged. To improve our results as communicators, we must raise our own level of self-awareness and improve our behaviors as speakers. Now, rarely does one speak to a skilled audience, but plenty of audiences have had to listen to unskilled speakers. But remember this, the foundation for all communication is engagement. So the big question is, how do we get engagement? Number 11 in your guide says, great communicators must be connectors who go first when seeking connection. They don't wait for their audience or their people in general to come and engage them. And when they do go to the people, they find some common ground. They know it's never about them and what they want to say. It's all about what others need to hear. They engage and listen with intention and avoid making assumptions about a person's needs. If we wait for others to connect with us, it might be a long time, maybe never. So know this, anyone can develop these areas that I just mentioned. Caring for those that we speak to will motivate us to improve. Remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So a good way to start with people is, don't try to impress others with what you know. Focus on starting out by showing them how much you actually care. People's impressions of you and your abilities will change over time. Once they realize that you do care about them, they'll begin to trust you and your ability to impact them. Always remember the 3 big things people want to know about you before they're ready to receive what you're communicating. They want to know from you, number 1, do you care for me? Number 2, can I trust you? And number 3, can you help me? Be the type of person people want to let into their lives. To do that, seek to understand them before seeking to be understood by them. Accessing someone's life and their mind is something that's precious, sacred, and privileged. Number 12 in your guide says, always be aware of who's doing most of the talking, especially in one-on-one and small group conversations. Remember, when speaking to an audience, they aren't likely speaking back to you audibly, but they speak volumes with body language and facial expressions. Being able to understand that connection language is a higher level of communication. When someone invites you to speak to others, Your communication with the person who invited you is important. You should start out by asking questions to determine what the group actually needs. And if we don't listen more than we talk, we fail to find the real needs of the potential audience. Without preparing to engage this way, the best we can do is guess what they need. If that becomes the case, we default to assuming, and then our communication ends up being about us and what we know. If that happens, the best we can do is to impress them with our performance and knowledge and fail to actually help or impact them. If you want to be invited to speak in the future, you've got to know this. Nobody wants to schedule an impressor. They seek people who impart value and impact. And to be that person, you must find out what your audience values. Here is the engagement pillar's big idea. If we want engagement, we must take a genuine interest in the people who are in front of us. Too often, we can become too concerned about whether we're interesting enough or not. And guess what? Almost everyone does. So you be the one who connects with that need in other people. Seek to be interested rather than seeking to be interesting. Number 13 in your guide says, use the feel, felt, and found technique to engage with your audience. Identify what they feel right now and truly empathize with them. Be careful not to condescend, to assume, or to make judgments. And remember, others will remember you much longer by the way you made them feel than anything else, even if you have the very solution that they need. Going straight to a solution to their problem often comes across as arrogant and uncaring to an audience. Share with them how you felt when you were faced with a similar situation or a circumstance. And when you do this, you become the leader who is now walking with the people. Identifying with the people is the only way to truly engage. Finding common ground is essential for us to connect as communicators. Tell them what you found that helped you get through your predicament and how you believe it can improve their situation or their predicament. Now, once you have found common ground and made a connection, you're now more likely to actually help others. And why is that? Because when they see your willingness to be vulnerable, they will be more likely to trust your solution. All effective communication sits on a foundation of engagement. Here is your roadmap for success. Number 1, get the attention of others by paying attention to them. Number 2, connect with common ground. Others need to trust you and can only do so by knowing you. Number 3, be relevant. Ensure you know what you're talking about and that it meets your audience's needs. Research shows that the number 1 skill to increase our personal success is to communicate better. We do this by caring about who we're communicating with, building trust with them, and improving your communication skills to build our influence so our audience will allow us to help them. You can do this. You can become a better communicator.